The night was cold, and the wind carried a bitter sound across the empty land. On this distant planet, under two pale moons, an alien girl walked alone. Her skin was marked with strange colors, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Her own people called her cursed, and they pushed her away. Wherever she went, whispers followed, and children hid behind their parents. No one wanted to stand near her. No one wanted to call her family. She was born different, and because of that, she became an outcast. She had tried to smile once, to greet others kindly, but they turned away. When she tried to join the village fires, the elders told her to leave. When she reached out for food, hands pulled the bowls back. When she asked questions, no one answered. Only silence filled the air. Every day was a reminder that she was unwanted. Her heart carried scars far deeper than her skin ever could. At night, she sat alone in the caves, listening to the echoes. Sometimes she spoke to herself, pretending someone was there. She asked the shadows, "Why am I different?" The shadows never answered, but she hoped one day someone would. Loneliness was her only companion. The stars above were her only friends. She often watched the sky, wondering if life beyond her world was the same. Were there others like her, cursed and alone? Or was there a place where different was not feared? She wished for that place, a place where she could belong. But wishes were weak against the cruelty of her people. Every day, she grew more silent, more hidden, more afraid to dream. One evening, when the twin moons shone bright, she heard the sound of engines. It was strange, a sound she had never heard before. The ground shook lightly, and a streak of fire crossed the horizon. Her eyes widened, her heart raced. Something was falling from the sky, something unknown. Fear and curiosity pulled at her. Should she hide, or should she see? She ran across the rocky ground, her bare feet silent in the dust. Ahead, on the valley floor, she saw it, a strange metal shape glowing hot, smoke rising from its body. It hissed and groaned like a wounded beast. The air smelled of fire and oil. She crouched behind a boulder, peeking with wide eyes. From the broken shape, figures stepped out, not aliens like her, not anyone she had ever seen. These were humans, though she did not know the word. They wore strange suits, shining with glass and light. Their voices carried in the air, harsh yet soft. They moved carefully, checking their ship, helping each other. She had never seen such teamwork before. Her people only turned on the weak, but these creatures lifted each other up. Her heart pounded, her body trembled. She should have run back to the caves, but she could not. Her eyes locked on one of them, a man with calm steps. He looked around, scanning the valley, and then, suddenly, his gaze found her. The world froze. The outcast girl gasped, her breath caught in her chest. For the first time in her life, someone looked at her not with fear or hate. His eyes did not sharpen in disgust, nor did his mouth curl in anger. Instead, his gaze was steady, warm, curious. It pierced through her loneliness like light cutting through shadow. She wanted to run, yet she could not move. Her heart whispered, "He sees me." The moment felt endless, silent, powerful. But then fear returned. She turned and fled, disappearing into the night. Her feet carried her faster than ever. But deep inside, she carried something new. For the first time in her life, she felt a spark of hope. The alien girl could not sleep that night. Her mind kept replaying the moment in the valley. The human's gaze haunted her, not with fear, but with something she had never known, gentleness. No one from her people had ever looked at her like that. She had only seen disgust, rejection, and hatred. But this stranger, this human, had looked at her as if she mattered. Her chest felt strange, heavy yet warm, like a fire she did not understand. She told herself it was foolish. He was not of her world, not of her kind. And yet, curiosity burned stronger than fear. She wanted to know more. She wanted to see him again. Against all reason, against all warnings that echoed in her memory, she decided. Tomorrow she would return to the valley. When the first light of morning touched the sky, She moved carefully across the rocks. The valley was still, the ship quiet but alive with faint hums. The humans were awake, working around their craft, repairing what was broken. She crouched behind a ledge, watching, her glowing eyes fixed on their movements. She saw how they spoke with each other, how they shared tools and gestures. Every action carried meaning, every voice carried connection. It was nothing like her people, who lived in silence when it came to her. These humans seemed like a family, bound by something invisible yet strong. Her gaze fell again on the man from last night. He was speaking to the others, pointing at damaged parts of the ship. His face carried focus, but his movements were calm. Suddenly, as if pulled by instinct, his head turned. Their eyes met again across the distance. Her body froze, her heart raced like a wild storm. He did not shout. He did not chase her away. Instead, he lifted one hand slowly, a small wave. A simple gesture, yet it struck her like lightning. She ducked down quickly, pressing herself against the stone. Her breath came fast, her hands trembling. Why did he do that? Why did it feel like the world had shifted? For a long time she stayed hidden, debating if she should run or stay. But something inside her refused to leave. The memory of his calm gaze and that gentle wave chained her to the spot. As the day passed, she watched them more. She saw how they shared food, how they drank water, how they laughed softly. Laughter. She had never heard such a sound. Her people did not laugh when she was near, only whispered cruel things. But the sound of human laughter filled the valley with warmth. It was like sunlight breaking into a cave. She wanted to step closer to understand it, but fear kept her rooted in shadows. By evening, when the sky turned deep purple, she could not resist any longer. She took one careful step out from hiding, then another. Her heart thumped so loud she was sure they could hear it. The man noticed her again, and this time he did not move quickly. He stood still, patient, as though waiting for her choice. The other humans turned their heads, whispering to each other, but he raised his hand gently, silencing them. His eyes stayed locked on hers, not commanding, not threatening, just steady. She inched closer, her bare feet scraping softly on the dust. When she reached a safe distance, she stopped. The silence between them was heavy, but not hostile. He reached into a small pouch and pulled something out. A piece of food, wrapped and small, glowing faintly in the firelight. He placed it on the ground before him and stepped back. His message was clear even without words. An offering, a sign of peace. Her body shook, every instinct screaming to run. Her people had warned her of outsiders, called them dangerous. But her heart remembered the loneliness of the caves, the rejection of her kind. And now, this man's gesture stood before her, simple and true. With trembling hands, she stepped forward, picked up the food, and held it close. She lifted her eyes to his, and though she could not speak his language, she whispered in her heart, "Thank you." The man gave a small nod, as if he understood. The humans behind him looked surprised, yet they did not attack. Instead, they watched quietly, respecting his choice to reach her. For the first time, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, in the human's gaze, she had found something new. Hope was no longer a dream. It was standing in front of her, waiting. The night wrapped the valley in shadows, but the alien girl could still feel the weight of what had happened. She sat on the edge of the rocks, clutching the strange food in her hands. Her glowing eyes reflected the firelight of the human camp far below. She had not eaten yet, too afraid it might harm her, but too moved to throw it away. It was not just food. It was proof that someone, even if from another world, had offered her kindness. The memory of his gaze stayed with her, calm, steady, unlike the sharp stares of her people. When others looked at her, she felt broken, but when he looked, she felt seen. Sleep came slowly, and dreams carried her back to her childhood. She remembered the first time she had been pushed aside, the first time the other children ran from her glowing eyes, the first time her mother whispered that she was different. Each memory cut like a blade, But now, in the corner of her mind, stood another image. A man in strange armor, his hand lifted in peace, his gaze filled with warmth. That image pushed away the darkness, and for the first time, she did not wake in tears. When morning came, she returned to the valley again. This time, she did not hide as long. The humans were busy repairing their ship, their voices rising and falling like music. The man was there too, giving orders, guiding the others. Yet his gaze still drifted to the rocks where she stood. He did not call her, did not force her, but he waited, patient as the sun itself. Slowly, her feet carried her closer, step by step, until the space between them was smaller than before. Their eyes met once more, and the silence between them grew heavy. It was not the silence of rejection, nor the silence of hate. It was the silence of two souls trying to understand each other without words. She wanted to ask so many questions, but her tongue held no language that he could know. Instead, her eyes became her voice, wide, curious, filled with unspoken pain. And in his gaze, she found answers. He did not fear her. He did not despise her. He only wanted her to know she was not alone. He took a step closer, careful and slow, and then stopped, giving her space. From his pouch, he pulled another gift, this time a small object that glowed with soft light. He placed it on the ground between them and waited. The girl looked at it, then at him, her chest tight with a mix of fear and wonder. Her people never gave her anything, they only took. Yet this stranger, this human, kept offering pieces of himself. She bent down, picked up the light, and held it to her chest. For a moment, her glowing eyes met his, and something passed between them. A promise without words, a bond without sound. The other humans watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. Some looked uneasy, others curious, but none dared to break the quiet moment. It was as if they too felt something sacred unfolding. The man nodded gently, his face calm, and the girl felt her heart beat faster. The silence stretched, long and powerful, and she realized it was no longer empty. This silence carried meaning, it carried trust, it carried the beginning of something new. She turned to leave, her hands gripping the glowing gift. Her steps were slow, as if her heart did not want to break the moment. When she reached the edge of the rocks, she stopped and looked back. The human was still watching her, his gaze steady, patient, endless. She lifted her hand, clumsy and unsure, but it was enough. His lips curved into the smallest smile, and her chest filled with warmth. No words had been spoken, no voices exchanged, yet it felt as though they had shared an entire conversation. A conversation of the heart, written in silence, carried by the gaze. That night, when she sat alone in her cave, she no longer felt completely alone. The silence around her was not empty now. It was filled with the memory of his eyes. For the first time in her life, silence did not hurt. Silence gave her peace. And deep inside, she knew she would return again, because the silent gaze of a human had given her what her entire people could not. Hope. The alien girl returned to her cave that night with the glowing object pressed against her chest. Its faint light bathed the walls in soft colors, a warmth she had never known. She placed it beside her as she curled into the corner, her thoughts heavy and restless. Her people had never given her gifts. They had only taken her peace, her joy, her place among them. And yet a stranger, a human, had offered something without asking anything in return. Her heart whispered that this meant more than survival. It meant trust. But trust was dangerous, she knew that. If her people discovered her secret, they would punish her, perhaps cast her out even further. They already called her cursed. They already treated her like she was not one of them. To be caught with humans could be worse. And yet, no matter how much her fear grew, her hope grew stronger. The silent gaze of the man haunted her in ways she could not ignore. So she decided, against every warning in her mind, that she would meet him again. The next evening, she returned to the valley. The humans were gathered near their fire, sharing food, fixing their broken tools. The man was there too, his posture calm, his eyes scanning the shadows. It was as if he already knew she was coming. Her steps were quiet, her glowing eyes catching the flicker of the flames. The moment she appeared, he rose slowly, careful not to frighten her. He motioned for the others to stay, and they obeyed. She felt her chest tighten. This was not just chance anymore. This was becoming a secret meeting. They stood apart, the fire between them. For a long time neither spoke, but silence no longer frightened her. His gaze was steady, his breathing calm, and in that quiet, she found comfort. Then he reached into his pouch again and pulled out something small. This time not food, not light, but a simple piece of cloth, soft and folded. He placed it on the ground and stepped back. His meaning was clear, another gift, another bridge. Her trembling hands reached for it, the fabric cool against her skin. She pressed it to her cheek, not knowing why, but feeling its comfort all the same. The man's lips curved into the faintest smile, and she felt heat rise in her chest. She wanted to thank him, but her voice carried no words he could understand. So she lowered her head in respect, a gesture her people rarely used for her. He seemed to understand, because his expression softened further. Then he knelt down, picking up a stick, and began to draw in the dirt. At first, she tilted her head, confused, but slowly, lines became shapes, stars, circles, a map of the sky above them. Her glowing eyes widened, her breath caught. He was showing her the heavens, teaching her through pictures instead of words. Her hands shook as she bent down and added her own marks beside his. Crude symbols of her people, the twin moons of her world. He looked at them, then at her, and gave a slow nod. Together, they drew in silence, their worlds meeting on the ground between them. It was more than art. It was a language, a secret one that only they shared. For the first time, she was not an outcast in the presence of another. For the first time, her difference felt like connection. The fire burned low, and the other humans whispered quietly among themselves. They did not interfere, though some looked wary, some curious. The man kept his focus on her, patient and steady. She felt the weight of danger pressing against her back, the memory of her people's cruel words. But when she looked into his eyes, that fear loosened. Here, in this hidden space, she belonged, even if the rest of the world would never accept her. He did. As the night deepened, she rose slowly, clutching the cloth in her hands. Her body trembled with the choice she was making. If her people found out, she would be punished, maybe even banished forever. But as she looked back one last time, the man still waiting, still watching her with that silent promise, she knew the risk was worth it. This was no longer chance, no longer curiosity. This was a secret she would guard with her life. Because in his gaze, she had found more than kindness. She had found the beginning of hope. Days turned into nights, and nights back into days. The alien girl found herself drawn again and again to the valley. Every evening she told herself she would not go, that it was too dangerous. But when the stars appeared, her heart carried her back to the humans. It was no longer chance, it was no longer curiosity, it was something deeper, something that gave her strength when the rest of her world only gave her pain. The man was always there, waiting without impatience. He never rushed her, never demanded she come closer. He simply stood, offering silence, offering safety, and slowly, step by step, she stopped hiding among the rocks and began to stand nearer to their fire. The humans gave her space, some still uncertain, some still whispering, but none dared to break the bond that was forming before their eyes. One evening, she watched as the humans shared their food. They sat in a circle, passing bowls and containers, laughter weaving between them. She sat apart, her knees pulled to her chest, watching the fire reflect in their eyes. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she did not dare to move. She was used to being the one left out, the one no one invited. Then, to her surprise, the man rose and carried a small piece of bread to her. He placed it gently on the ground, then stepped back, waiting. Her glowing eyes flickered between him and the food, torn between fear and need. But the warmth in his gaze told her it was safe. With trembling hands, she picked it up and took a bite. It was simple, but it felt like the richest gift she had ever received. From that night, food became their silent language. He offered, she accepted, and with each exchange, the walls around her heart crumbled. She began to realize something she had never dared to believe. Kindness could exist without cruelty following after it. For her people, every act carried cost. Every hand reached only to push her down. But for this human, kindness seemed to flow freely, as natural as breathing. And she did not know why, but it made her want to trust him. Another night, as the air grew colder, the humans gathered closer to the fire. The girl shivered, her thin skin no shield against the chill. She tried to hide her trembling, curling her body tighter, but the man noticed, his gaze sharp yet gentle. Without hesitation, he removed something from his shoulders, a jacket, thick and worn from many journeys. He stepped forward, holding it out, his eyes speaking words she could not understand. Her breath caught, her heart hammered. She had never been given warmth before. Her people had left her in the cold, left her to suffer without care. And now, a stranger from another world was offering her comfort. Slowly, cautiously, she took the jacket, the fabric heavy in her hands. She wrapped it around herself, and the heat of his body still clung to it. For the first time in her life, she felt protected, not by stone walls, not by shadows, but by someone's choice. That night, she did not return to her cave. Instead, she sat near their fire, silent among them. The humans glanced at her, some uncertain, some curious, but none drove her away. The man sat nearby, close enough for her to feel safe, far enough not to frighten her. The crackling fire filled the silence, and though no words were shared, she felt part of something larger. A circle she had never been allowed to enter before. Her heart swelled with a warmth she could not name. But kindness came with risk, and deep down she knew it. If her people discovered what she was doing, they would call her a traitor. They would say she had betrayed her kind, and perhaps they would cast her out forever. Still, as she looked into the humans' eyes across the fire, she realized something powerful. Being alone among her people was worse than any danger. With them, she was an outcast, but with him, she was seen. And in that gaze, in that kindness, she found the courage to keep coming back. The alien girl's secret visits grew longer, her steps more confident. Every night, she returned to the humans, and every night the bond grew stronger. The man no longer had to wait in silence. She came willingly, sitting by their fire, sharing their warmth. Her glowing eyes reflected the flames, no longer filled only with fear, but with something gentler. Hope. But hope came at a cost, and danger was never far. Her people had begun to whisper, their sharp eyes watching the path she walked. She noticed them lingering near the caves, muttering to one another. They had seen the strange lights in the valley, heard the foreign sounds in the night. To them, humans were intruders, and to her people, outsiders were always a threat. She knew if they discovered her secret, the punishment would be cruel. Still, her heart would not let her stay away. One evening, as she made her way back to the valley, she heard voices behind her. Familiar tones, sharp and accusing. Two villagers followed her steps, their words cutting into the dark. She goes to them. One hissed, "She betrays us," the other answered. Her chest tightened, fear clawing at her throat. She ran faster, disappearing into the shadows before they could see where she truly went. But the seed of danger had been planted, and she knew time was running out. That night, when she reached the humans, her steps were quicker, her breaths uneven. The man noticed at once, his gaze narrowing with concern. He stood and reached out a hand, not to touch, but to steady her with his calm presence. She shook her head, trembling, and pointed back toward the cliffs. He did not understand her words, but he understood her fear. His hand lowered slowly, and his eyes promised her safety. Still, she knew no gaze could protect her from the wrath of her people. The next day, whispers spread through her village like fire. The elders gathered, their voices heavy with suspicion. They say she walks with strangers, one muttered. She brings danger to our land, another growled. Her heart pounded as she hid behind the stone walls, listening. Every word felt like a knife, every whisper a warning that soon they would act. She had always been their outcast, but now they would call her a traitor. When night came again, she stood at the edge of the valley, torn between fear and longing. Should she risk another meeting, or should she vanish into the shadows forever? Her hands clutched the cloth he had given her, her body wrapped in the jacket that still smelled faintly of him. Every gift he had offered reminded her of what she had found: kindness, warmth, acceptance. Things her people had never given her. She could not let go of that, no matter the danger. So she stepped forward once more, choosing courage over fear. The humans greeted her with quiet relief. The man's eyes met hers, steady as always, but tonight she saw something different. Not just patience, not just kindness, but a silent question. Why was she so afraid? She wanted to answer, to tell him of the whispers, the danger, but words failed her. So instead, she sat closer to the fire than before, her body trembling. He did not press her. He did not demand answers. Instead, he placed another gift before her, this time a small crystal filled with light. It pulsed softly, steady like a heartbeat. She picked it up with shaking hands, and as its glow touched her skin, calm spread through her chest. It was as if he was telling her without words, "You are safe here." But outside the valley, danger grew. Her people gathered in secret, their voices sharp with anger. "We must protect ourselves," one elder said. "She will lead them to us," another snarled. And so they planned, their eyes turning not only to the humans, but to the outcast who had betrayed them. She did not know it yet, but the risk she carried in her heart was about to come crashing down. That night, as she looked into the man's gaze, her fears melted for a brief moment. She let herself believe in the safety he offered, in the hope that burned brighter than her loneliness. But somewhere in the shadows, her people watched, their eyes filled with rage. And the risk she had chosen to take would soon decide her fate. The night was heavy with silence, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before a storm, the kind that pressed against the chest and warned of danger. The alien girl sat by the human fire, the man close by, his gaze steady as always. But her heart could not rest. The whispers of her people still echoed in her ears. They would come. She knew it, and when they did, they would not show mercy. The humans worked on their ship, their tools sparking in the night. They did not know the danger that crept closer with every hour. The man sensed her fear, though she said no words. He kept his eyes on her, calm, protective, promising silently that she was not alone. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let his gaze shield her from the storm. But shadows moved on the cliffs above, and she knew belief would not be enough. The attack came just before dawn. Her people descended like a tide of anger, their voices sharp, their weapons raised. "Traitor!" they shouted, their eyes burning with hate. She stood frozen, caught between two worlds. The humans leapt to their feet, weapons drawn to defend themselves. But the man lifted his hand, holding them back. He stepped forward alone, placing himself between her and the raging crowd. His eyes never left hers, steady, calm, as if telling her to be strong. Her people hurled accusations, calling her cursed, calling her a danger. They demanded she leave the humans, return to the caves, return her chains. Her heart trembled, her body shook. For a moment, she almost gave in, almost lowered her head and accepted the fate she had always known. But then she looked at the man, standing tall though outnumbered, his gaze burning with quiet strength. And in that gaze, she saw what her people could never give her. Respect, not pity, not hate, but respect. Her voice broke free, trembling yet fierce. "I will not go back," she cried, though her words were her own tongue, not theirs. Her people heard the defiance in her tone, and their fury rose. They rushed forward, but the humans moved too. Weapons clashed. Shouts filled the valley, the night alive with chaos. Through it all, the man never left her side, shielding her, guiding her. For the first time, she was not running, not hiding. For the first time, she was standing with someone who believed in her. The battle did not last long. The humans were strong, disciplined, their strange weapons burning with light. Her people, fueled by anger but not unity, began to fall back. They shouted curses as they fled, their voices promising vengeance. But when the dust cleared, silence returned to the valley. The humans stood together, breathing hard but alive. And she stood among them, no longer at the edges but within their circle. The man turned to her, his armor dented, his face marked with dirt, yet his eyes still carried the same steady warmth. She met his gaze, her chest swelling with something she had no name for. It was not just kindness, not just safety, it was belonging. In that moment, she realized her exile was no longer a curse. It had led her here, to him, to them, and in his gaze, she saw a future brighter than the moons above. When the first rays of dawn touched the valley, painting the rocks in gold, she felt a weight lift from her heart. The shadows of her past were still there, the hatred of her people still waiting beyond the cliffs. But now she carried something stronger. Hope, born not from dreams, but from the gaze of a human who had seen her for who she truly was. She was no longer the cursed outcast, no longer the girl hiding in caves. She was someone who mattered, someone who could stand tall, and though the road ahead would be hard, she knew she would never walk it alone. As the sun rose higher, she turned to the man, clutching the cloth, the jacket, and the glowing crystal close to her chest. He nodded once, and in that simple gesture, she saw a promise. Whatever came next, they would face it together, outcast and human, different yet bound by something greater. And so the lonely girl who had once begged the shadows for answers stepped forward into the light. Her story no longer one of rejection, but of courage, belonging, and hope. The new dawn had begun,